Right, good evening, and it's really my pleasure to introduce to the Shalom Charismatic Community Father Cecil Rogerson, and he's the parish priest here in Birmingham Archdiocese of St. John Fisher, West Heath, St. Bridget's, Northfield, and believe it or not, he's got 3 parishes to look after, and the third one is Our Lady of Perpetual Succor in Renewal. It's our privilege as a praying community, as a charismatic community, to welcome you, Father, and I know you want to share about renewal and whatever else it is. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and please bless us now with what the Lord has given you.
Thank you very much for that. I've been asked to come and talk and share something with you on divine renovation. So I suppose I'd want to begin just very briefly by saying I hope you've got some questions about it, because maybe we can look at those later. So what if I made a start, if you'd be happy with that, if I made a start and then throw it open for questions and then respond to those? Would that be all right?
Yeah.
Okay. I first encountered divine renovation when I was told about the book by Father James Mallon, and I read the book, and it was one of those amazing books that I could, from the beginning recognize everything in it, recognize the issues that were being grappled with in a way that kind of made sense. And of course, where he's wanting to take us is to say, as Catholic Christians in the English-speaking world, we're in a pickle. We are facing a decline, and it was 2.5 years ago that he said this. He said, in the next decade, the number of practicing Catholics will halve, and the number of the priests will halve. And I think we're seeing that. I mean, that is just, it's happening around us. Now, we can either become concerned to the level of, what are we doing about just getting more people in? Or we respond to his invitation to say, let us have a look at ourselves, what we've been doing, and also what we want to be doing for the future, according to a biblical paradigm. Because it's not just about, keeping everything going, given that there are financial implications to declining membership. It's not just about that. It's about what kind of community, what kind of a witness to Jesus do I want to be? And do we want our communities to be? So what he presents then in the book is basically a way in which we can, with a set of criteria, look at the kind of culture that we are and ask some critical questions about those. I would just say to you, read the book, but if you want an easier introduction to it, that'll be able to get you in pretty quickly, and I'll be surprised if you don't look at more than one. But he has a set of interviews. If you just Google interview with Father James Mallon, and there are 5 interviews with a male interviewee. They're only just over 15 minutes. And in these 5 interviews, he covers the main themes of the book. So if you want a quick introduction into it, and then you could always take some of the themes that he explores and look at that in greater detail in the book. They're very accessible. I mean, if you just think, if you've got 45 minutes, you will have seen 3 of them and you will have been through most of it. So it really is, and he's an engaging speaker, and I'd really encourage you to do that. But there's something else that is kind of that I've been aware of too. Divine renovation is a strategy that's been accepted in many places in the Catholic world. The Diocese of Portsmouth, the Bishop of Portsmouth has had James Mallon over to speak to all these clergy and the people of the diocese. Archbishop Bernard had James Mallon, when he was in the country, come and talk to a group of clergy and lay people who were engaged in divine renovation. And Suzanne from our parish went to represent us. And there are many places where people are exploring things. I don't want anybody to think this is the answer. We've got to take a model which he developed in Canada, in Nova Scotia, and we've got to apply it to ourselves. But insofar as he's talking about the situation in the English-speaking Catholic world, it is relevant to us, and we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we did not at least listen to the critique he offers of the state of our church, as well as a way of addressing that. So that's what I think is important. It is not the only way. We're not wanting to become clones of St. Benedict's Parish. We're wanting to see how can we take this and assess ourselves in relation to it. Because if we don't do that, we will simply be putting a veneer, because this seems to be the thing that everybody's doing and spoken about. We put this veneer, but it won't really have changed anything. Now, before listening to and before exploring Father James Mallon and Divine Renovation, I attended a conference at Oscott in about 2009. It was 2009. It was the year for priests, and the Oscott College got the bishop, who's the Archbishop Joseph Visikela, who is, let me just see where the bitties I've got about him. He's president for the Pontifical Council for the Promotion of the New Evangelization. And that's his role. And he came to speak to us. Now, given I'd only been ordained as a Catholic priest for 2 years, he said something which shocked me. And what he said was this: a survey had been done in the Catholic Church in Canada, asking people why they had left the Catholic Church. And he came up with a number of percentages. Let me deal with the first one. The abuse scandals. 21% left because of the abuse scandals. 17% left because they disengaged with the church. Often they moved, often a relative died who they used to accompany to Mass, and once that person died, they kind of never quite got over it really, and didn't go back to Mass. It was difficult to go back to the place where the funeral was, or to go back without the person. But they didn't leave for any hostile reasons. You know, sometimes their work patterns had changed and they were unable to get to Mass. And as I say, the big one was people had moved out the area and simply didn't re-engage with the local Catholic community. But the one that shocked me was this: 48%. 48% left because they said the church lacked, and wait for it, spirituality. Now that shocked me. I was an Anglican. I always kind of looked to the Catholic Church as having spirituality, retreats, all the things I was doing as an Anglican. Where did they come from? Spirituality, devotions, retreat work, all of that. So when he said that 48% left because they said the church lacked spirituality, I had no idea what exactly this meant. At that stage, I was still chaplain at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and would be for another 3.5 years. I was then made parish priest of Brierley Hill and King's Winford. And I then began to understand what that lack of spirituality was about. Where did I discover this? Well, it was the sacramental preparation programs. What was the first things that I did? The first thing I was kind of presented to me was, Father, we have these commitment masses. Right, explain to me what a commitment mass is. Well, the children who are at school and are preparing for First Confession, First Holy Communion or Confirmation, they come with their parents to Mass, and there's this little order of service, and the parents promise that they will support the children, and the children promise that they will cooperate with the process. I did that, and it was great. You know, the church was full. There were loads of young people and children and their parents, some of whom I knew, the vast majority I didn't. And this would happen year in and year out. I'd see them for that event. I'd see them at the First Holy Communion, and I'd see them at the confirmation. And that was it. And I began to reflect a bit on this. First communions, the church was full. The people all had their friends there. This was a big event. But everybody who was there knew that those children who received communion on Saturday had no intention of receiving it on Sunday or any Sunday thereafter. And everyone knew that. Parents, grandparents, friends, godparents, the whole lot. It was also true of the sacrament of confirmation. The bishops knew well that those who they confirmed on a Wednesday night, Friday night, whenever it was, those children would not be seen in church again until maybe they got married. What was going on there? Again, as I said, everybody knew that there was no intention of this event becoming an integral part of that person's life thereafter. And then the penny began to drop. That was quite clear. These events, great, wonderful though they were at one level, or very disturbing at another, were absolutely void for the vast majority of any spirituality. The thing that really amazed me, I can get it. I've got 2 children of my own. I can get it that by the time they go to secondary school, they're going to explore all sorts of things. All sorts of things now become available to them. And so they're going to put faith on the back burner, and maybe they'll return to it at some time. That is our hope. You know what I couldn't understand, and still don't? The parents who journeyed with them to that point, they also left. I began to understand clearly what this lack of spirituality was about. And it was pretty obvious that we were in a dire position. So I think Mallon is, Archbishop Fisichella touched on something. And Father James Mallon also looks at how we address our sacramental preparation. That is absolutely crucial. Let me just give you a little quote of Father James Mallon's, on this particular issue. I think he's very, very funny on it. He says, settling for external appearances that have little or no connection to the internal reality. How long can a pastor and community joyfully and wholeheartedly celebrate confirmation as the completion of Christian initiation, knowing all too well that most of the freshly initiated have, in their minds, just obtained a ticket out of the church? What makes it worse is that the young people know that you know, and worse than that, they know that you know that they know that you know. At stake is our very integrity as church. And I think that is deeply, deeply disturbing if we are going to simply watch these events happening in our parishes, participate in them, and simply think that this is a great event. We need to be disturbed by it. I guess the other thing that is also very telling with Father James Mallon is that he says to us, you know, it's no good just having a set of programs and so we change one or two things, you know, it's about changing. And in his second interview, I think it is, he looks at a key area. And that is, he says, we need to change the culture of our parishes and communities. Now, there's a number of aspects to this. So if we take sacramental preparation for argument's sake, very often people might agree with what I'm communicating in terms of James Mallon's understanding and Archbishop Fisichella's understanding. People will nod their heads and recognize that. But a strange thing happens. Very often it's still the grandparents who want you to baptize their kids, their grandchildren, and see them through the process. And I think that is the difficult one. In a sense, their children have less of a problem. They probably only practicing because mom and dad want them to. And one of the things about that 17% who left in an antagonistic way is, mom died, I don't need to go anymore. Dad died, I don't need to go anymore. The pressure of having to satisfy the religious aspirations for myself from my parents is now gone. And so I can settle to my default position, which is I can be a good person without actually having to participate in ecclesial life. And that is a huge challenge for us. I think the other thing that I found, so in terms of the culture, James Mallon's talking about us looking at the fulfilling of the Great Commission and how we fulfill that. He says, you know, there are 4 aspects to it. We are to go, we are to make disciples, we are to teach, and we're to baptize. He says the sacramental stuff we're doing okay. The teaching, it's a bit hit and miss, but by and large, we can do it. And some people are doing it better than others. But the notion of making disciples is a problematic one. And he deals with another issue in terms of the culture, and that is the culture of clericalism. Now, what do we mean by that? He says, by and large, as Catholics, we've bought into the fact that Father and the sisters will do things, but for the lay folk, they don't need to. Father gets on with it, and people are quite happy with that. And we know how that pans out. Father, will you go visit somebody? And yes, I'm not underplaying that, and of course I will go. But there's something about how Catholic lay people have seen their own vocation that somehow, unless the person is in some sort of uniform, wears a veil or a collar, that somehow it's not as effective as, you know, I'm going to say a prayer with you. And I think those of you who have been blessed by a charismatic experience are a lot freer in being able to pray with people. The truth is that for the vast majority of Catholics, they would rather die than pray with somebody. They'll pray for, and there's place for that. I'm not saying there isn't place for that. Some of my most introverted people in parishes that I've known have also been the most faithful and the most prayerful. So I want us to hold that. But I'm talking about the person who says, I'm just petrified of that. I can't do that. Because that fear, my suspicion is, comes out of a sense of, I'm actually not sure who I'm praying to or how I even have a conversation with him on behalf of someone else. It comes out of a void, and that's my fear. So there's something about his understanding of clericalism, which I think is one which we've all got to increasingly take responsibility for. That somehow mission and ministry and evangelization is what the professionals do. And the professionals are those who have been ordained or made religious profession. And I think we've got to say to people, we've got to stop that now, because that's going to implode anyway. You're not going to have sisters in the parish. You're not going to have priests in every parish. So are you therefore going to just give up the faith? Now, in our own country, we have the heritage of the Recusant period, when people, it was the lay people who kind of did the catechesis. It was the lay people who sent the message round that there's a priest in the house, there'll be mass. So there's that amazing tradition that we have to be able to take hold of. Let me end with a final story of how important I think it is, because am I right in understanding, John, that I'm going to join you next week as well?
I'm not sure, but I mean, that's quite a good idea. We could do a series 2. I think it'd be great. Don't you think, Julie? Yes, please. Yeah, come back, because there's tons of questions that everybody has. Like conversion of heart and how we apply. You touched on that. How do we take a Canadian model and actually make it our own, rather than just mimicking what some other parish is doing, whether it's in Luton or if it's in Dagenham or in the other side of the world. And so, your wisdom on how you're applying that would be fantastic, Keith.
I've got a paper that if I emailed it to Julia, do you have the details of everybody else, and you can send it on to them, and then maybe we can discuss that next time.
Yes, I can send it to John particularly, and we can disperse it.
I'll email it to you. Okay. Super. I just wanted to end with something, and just to say, this is really a lovely opportunity for us, because at this stage we've actually got nothing to lose. We're heading for massive decline, and we've actually got nothing to lose to try other things. Clearly, what we've been doing up to now hasn't produced great fruit. Our system has not provided us with either disciples or vocations. That's just the proof of the pudding is in that reality. So I think we can begin to explore these things in a new kind of a way. One of the things that James Mallon says, which is also so true, and I've encountered this, is either people are in denial. And so people say, we heard this priest was saying this 20 years ago, and look, we're still around. Maybe that's true, but I'm experiencing there's a new edge to our decline, have a very real impact on us. But the other thing that he says people will do is people will say, okay, let's do what we did in the past, but with greater enthusiasm and energy. And that doesn't work, because people are a lot older. We don't have the people who did that stuff in the past around now to do it now, because the people who are around now don't know what we did in the past very often. And those who did it in the past can't anymore. That's where we are. So that whole notion of let's try these things that we used to do, that were so good, that were so successful, that everybody attended, it's not happening. It's not happening anymore. So I think there's some very real issues. He also, and this is the final thing I'll just say, he reminds us, because if we ever think that, Catholicism will never die out in England, well, I'm not sure about that. If we read the book of the Apocalypse, if the Lord wants to remove the lamp from the lampstand, he will do it. The other thing is, we need to remember that each of our auxiliary bishops is a titular bishop of a diocese that no longer exists. We're not just talking about a parish. We're talking about an entire diocese all over the world that no longer exist. And there's a variety of reasons, war, Muslim invasion, giving up of the faith, all sorts of things. So any notion that we are so special that we're going to be protected is just not there anymore, is just not there. So I think I'll stop for now. I mean, I don't know. We've gone on to just to 5:02. I'm happy to stay as long as you want to. If you want to ask any questions now, it's over to you, John.
Well, thank you very much. We've been listening to Father Cecil Rogerson, and he's been explaining to us how the parishes he leads are going into the Divine Renovation, exploring that model and seeing how it applies and how we can rejuvenate our parishes. And it's interesting, Father, because I'm also coming from an ex-Anglican perspective, and I joined the Catholic Church because I thought, yes, this is where the heart of spirituality is. And of course, we do have this unique heritage of faith that's continued through 2,000 years. So let's not forget that, and let's not give up hope. I'm thinking after Compline, which Deacon Bill, welcome. Deacon Bill is going to lead us in Compline in a few minutes. If anybody would like to say, if Father Cecil's got time, perhaps we can do the Q&A at the end of Compline. And we'd love to have you back next week, Father, if you're willing, and hear you out some more on this. Thank you very, very much indeed for coming tonight.
Sure.